Feraligatr has shocked the world. It has taken first place at Champions League Fukuoka. It looks like Champions League in Fukuoka was all about the anti-meta. We have multiple Feraligatr's in top 8, putting a stop to all of those Raging Bolts, Ogrepones, and Terapagos. We have a hybrid Dragapult Gholdengo taking second place, leveraging tons of draw power, one-shot knockouts, and of course bench damage. And of course, Mr. Anti-Meta himself, the latest version of Feraligatr. On the meta side, we're seeing the development of what's being called Terra Box. Basically just a bunch of Terra Pokemon in a Noctowl build, Teomask Ogrepone, Wellspring Ogrepone, along with Pikachu EX and Lily's Clefairy as the main attackers. I think that we're going to see more and more Wellspring Ogrepone because that torrential pump attack is really nice in a format with tons of Noctowls on the bench. Once they've sought their jewels, they're just sitting there on the bench doing nothing anyways. Now, surprisingly or not surprisingly, there were no Raging Bolts in the top 8, although there was one in top 16 making use of the Baby Raging Bolt and Ditto, interestingly enough. We also have a Terapazard with Dusknoir in the top 8. So I think that this deck is going to stick around for a while, as well as one Dragapult Dusknoir. And so if we've learned anything, it's that if you're going to play Charizard and you're going to play Dragapult, you're going to have to play it with Dusknoir. Well, unless you swap it with Gholdengo. So many people are having a knee-jerk reaction to this deck, and I kind of hated it myself as well, but I think it works. This deck has in fact been around for a while and it's been winning City League, so it's not just a fluke. This deck does have a track record. And before you write it off, think about it for a second. Think about how Dragapult Iron Thorns got so big. The fact is, Dragapult needs a buddy. Phantom Dive is a great attack, but 200 to the active is just not enough these days. Having a Defiance Band on it will help, but you can't always guarantee a Defiance Band. And even if you do have it, it still might not be enough. Of course, chaining Phantom Dive attacks is great, but that can be difficult to do. You have to have two fully set up Dragapults, attack with one Phantom Dive, absorb a hit, retreat into the next Dragapult, and Phantom Dive again. If you can do this, you may have just won the game, but that's a difficult setup. And not only that, but you're limiting your draw power because you're going down to either one or maybe no Dracloaks. Gholdengo provides an interesting solution for both of these problems. And yes, I say Gholdengo, not Gholdengo. Gholdengo has that massive one-shot knockout power, and it gets there quickly, being just a stage 1 and only costing 1 energy for its attack. It also gives you crazy draw power. Think about the combination of Dracloak and Gholdengo on your bench. You're doing that recon directive and you're hitting coin bonus. So this deck is seeing a lot of cards. And when you're playing Pokemon, seeing more cards is the way that you win the game. And of course, this deck is playing one Munkidori because who isn't? Energy Search Pro as the A spec, and then after that, it's a pretty simple 4 Arven build with 2 TM Evos, 2 Crispin, 3 Ionos, 1 Counter Catcher, 1 Boss, and 2 Crispin. Simple, yet creative and powerful and unafraid to be cringe. This deck totally deserves a top spot. The only downside is now I'm going to have to play against a bunch of these at my locals. Unless of course I'm playing it myself. Now we are on to the story of the day for Feraligatr. Now it's not a huge surprise because this deck has been on the come up, it's been winning at City Leagues, so there were some people expecting to see a high placing from Feraligatr, but first place is just crazy. It basically started as a meme deck last year, but over time it's been honed and perfected. Little by little, adding Badoo, adding Precious Trolley, and now with Melodic in the deck, I think it's hit its final form. I have to applaud this deck for winning because it has single-handedly shifted the meta. That's because post-rotation, so many players have gone for the Noctowl build, which requires that you play a Terra Pokemon. And with so many V Pokemon supporters gone, this makes logical sense. But Feraligatr was there, looming under the water, honing its skills, studying the blade, and waiting for the perfect time to strike. This deck that won is playing one Badoo. And Badoo is maybe the MVP of this deck. As you can see in this game, the Feraligatr player is just spamming that Itchy Pollen attack, and there's not much that the Terapagos Charizard player can do about it. And that Itchy Pollen attack is buying time for the Feraligatr player to get set up because it's a bit of a tricky setup and it has to go well to work. Which is why I'm surprised that this deck won, because while it can work, and I've seen it work, it seems like everything has to go perfectly. That's why Precious Trolley is a great A-spec for this deck. At first, I saw a lot of Grand Tree because you want to get to that Feraligatr quickly and you can't play Candy because you need to be able to use the Stage 1 Croconaw attack. In this top 4 game, he actually prized Precious Trolley, but was still able to buy himself enough time with Badoo to get set up, which really shows that this deck has what it takes, even when its A-spec is prized. Now, Melodic was another amazing choice here, because even though it requires evolving, and even though it has a 3 energy attack cost, it resists all damage from Terra-type Pokemon. And its attack, if you can get there, hits for 160, which is nothing to sneeze at, and it puts your opponent to sleep, which is the cherry on top of an already annoying deck. I'm surprised that this deck worked so well to win such a big tournament. I'm sure I'm going to see more and more of these popping up at my local gym battles. And it should be a lot of fun because I want to see how people counter this. People are going to have to use single prize Pokemon. People are going to have to figure out a way to stop Munkidori. There is one Pokemon that comes to mind that would be a great counter for Munkidori, but it just falls short and it's one of the most disappointing cards I've seen recently. It's Jirachi. Now Jirachi has the ability with Stellar Veil to block damage from being placed by effects from attacks from your opponent's basic Pokemon. Now, I don't actually know of a current basic Pokemon that has an effect that places damage counters. Everything I can think of is an evolved Pokemon, such as Dragapult with Phantom Dive, or it comes from an ability like Munkidori's Adrenabrain. So Jirachi would be such a cool counter for Munkidori, but it just doesn't work. I'm curious as to how this is going to be stopped. Rabska is another option that people have been using in place of Manaphy, but again, this is only for attacks, not for abilities. So there's really no stopping Munkidori. It's just on a tear right now. The problem with Feraligatr is that you have to be a skilled player who's used the deck quite a bit to really make it work. Because I have played a few games against Feraligatr at locals and I've won every game, and it seems like the opponent's never really able to get set up and never really actually starts playing the game. I found that it's pretty easy to counter with Hop's Zacian, and I think that there is potential for the Hops deck going forward, although there was no top placing from Hops at this recent Champions League. There was, however, an Ends Zoroark, which placed in the top 16, so that deck will continue probably to be strong. Overall, I'm really happy with the results of this Champions League because for the last month, City League has been dominated by the same decks. It's just been Raging Bolt and Dragapult over and over. And finally, we have something different. I think the top players came knowing that there was going to be a ton of Dragapult and Raging Bolt, and they came prepared to stop it with all of these wall and stall control type decks. There's of course going to be a backlash to that as well. People are going to now have to develop ways of getting around these wall decks. So I think that the meta is super promising for 2025. The vacuum post-rotation was filled by some sort of boring decks, but I'm really happy to see that after Champions League in Fukuoka, things are getting a bit more interesting, and we have some really interesting, fun decks, some really unexpected decks that placed really high. So now there's going to be a pendulum swing in the other direction, where people are going to have to figure out how to get around these wall and control style decks. We're going to need new cards though, because we're missing draw engines. We're missing supporter type Pokemon. I just don't think that Revivroom is going to provide the draw engine for all these decks this year. There's got to be something coming that's going to be better. So it's really interesting to see players digging into the meme decks, perfecting them, and actually winning big tournaments with them. I think that right now Dragapult is overhyped, and Champions League showed that. Dragapult is still very strong. We can't deny Dragcloak's draw engine and the bench damage of Phantom Dive. However, I think we're going to have to get a little more creative, and whether that's a Goldango hybrid or something else, and yes, it's more fun to say Goldango, not Goldengo. So whether it's that deck or something else, I think we're going to have to get a little bit more creative, and I hope that it's just not Dragapult Dusknoir over and over and over. We could save Dragapult for another day. I think that the inclusion of multiple Jocks in the deck is interesting. I think Hawlucha in the deck is interesting. I think there's more interesting stuff to come. I would love to see more big wins from Slowking. Slowking actually recently won at a City League event, so I am putting some stock behind that deck. Regigigas has really sent it over the top. My beloved Gardevoir, unfortunately, did not perform so well, although there were a lot of players trying their hand at it, trying to make it work, trying to utilize that Lily's Clefairy, but the draw engine, I think, is just not there. It definitely has potential, and it's won some City Leagues, so it's not over yet, but we're gonna probably need new cards or a new way of playing it before it really becomes an S-tier deck again. That's it for me for this video, and if you want to stick around, I'm gonna go watch the Feraligatr finals game and do some live commentary and see what we can learn about how to play this deck.